Welcome, church. My name is Andrew Madrid, and today I have a good video for you from Capturing Catholicism. That's from this guy right here to the left of me. And the title of the video is There's No Way Out of Wes Huff's Dilemma. All right, well, let's see what Wes Huff's dilemma is, and I'm sure we'll find out what the truth is. Here we go.
This is Wes Huff. If you don't know Wes, he's a Reformed Baptist apologist, probably the internet's favorite defender of the Bible right now. He went viral on Joe Rogan, showing that the New Testament is the best preserved book of the ancient world. And honestly, he's 100%.
Now, I'm going to make a comment here because this guy here to the left of me, Cameron Bertuzzi, he just said that basically Wes Huff is the internet darling, right? He is the internet darling. Now, the reason why I bring this up, because it's very important. You see, there's a way to spot something that's not true. And it's very simple. When the world likes what you're doing or what you're saying, then no, it's not right. Something that you're saying, something that you're doing isn't right. And, this isn't an attack on anyone. This isn't an attack on Cameron Bertuzzi here. It's not an attack on Wes Huff. It's not an attack on anyone. We're talking about facts. We're talking about the truth. And so as an example, if we were to look, and I say look, we weren't present at the time, but when I say looking back at Jesus, if we just say, Jesus was God, okay? You would think, in our own human minds, we would probably say, if there was anybody on earth that people should have listened to, that should have been Jesus, right? Forget Andrew Madrid. Who's he, right? But Jesus was God. Everyone on the planet should have been listening to Jesus. Everything Jesus said, people should have been like, oh, Jesus, I love you. I want to hear everything you have to say. Tell us everything. But no, it didn't turn out that way. Unless you grew up under a rock, everybody knows that Jesus was tortured and killed. Jesus was murdered. Jesus didn't do anything wrong. He didn't say anything wrong. He wasn't a bad dude, but yet he was murdered. And it wasn't a homicide. It was a murder. He was brutally beaten and killed. And this is God. So in our human capacity, we have to say, look, if God could not get through to these human beings, who am I? I'm just Andrew Madrid, right? You see what I'm saying? I'm far from being God, right? I'm the lowly man on the totem pole. God's way up here, Andrew Madrid's down here. Who am I? You see, so what I'm trying to get at is, who is it that people listen to? They listen to the people that, tickle their ears, that say things that they like. So that means if you are the fan, if you are not fan, what's the word? If you are the say you are the the Wes Huff. You are the darling of the internet or darling of the world. Then obviously you are saying something that people like. But if you're saying something that people like, that means you're saying something that's not true. You're what it is, I don't know. I've never heard Wes Huff. I don't know what he talks about. But that's a clear sign. So let's look at some other figures. So we talked about Jesus, right? And that's God. What about someone like John the Baptist? The guy ate bugs. He lived out in the wilderness. Who was he? Did John the Baptist wear fancy suits? No. Did he eat, steaks? No. The guy ate bugs. And obviously, if he lived out in the wilderness, he didn't have a home. Means he was homeless. So he probably wasn't showering every day. He probably was filthy, smelly, whatever. And that's not to beat him down. We're just speaking factually. So who's going to want to be around a stinker? Let's be honest, in today's day and age where we have bathrooms and showers and all kinds of, perfumes and fragrances and whatnot, when we human beings come around someone who doesn't smell that great, what do? Do we want to stay there? No. No, we want to get away from them. So imagine you are hanging out with John the Baptist. What's going to make you stay with him? Like, what's going to make you stick around and listen to what he has to say? It would have to be pretty hard to stick around him. And I think in today's society, we don't think about these things nearly as much as we should. But, so obviously, whoever was following, John the Baptist around, they had to have really liked what he had to say. Now, the fact is that John the Baptist was teaching that you have to be baptized, right? Now, think about this. What is he teaching? He's teaching people to go down to the river and get dunked in the river and be baptized, right? And it's a visible sign, meaning the whole world can see you getting dunked in the river. There's no big secret. So think about this at the time, is that the world that John the Baptist and all the others lived in was a Roman world. So it wasn't a Christian world. And at the time, the Romans tolerated the Jews, but not by a whole lot. And so the fact is that if you were being baptized, you were dunked in the water and, the whole world is seeing it, you've just put a bullseye on your back. Yeah. So basically that's a death sentence. Because you're obviously not following the Romans. You're not treating Caesar as God. But you're also not, following the Jewish religion. Do you see what I'm saying? You're going way off track. So you would be an enemy of not only the Romans, but of the Jews. And so, like I said, is that is what John the Baptist saying? Is that tickling your ear? You're like, ooh, oh, John, tell me more about putting a bullseye on my back. Tell me more about how I'm gonna die. Right? I'm so excited to hear it. I want to know how bad it gets. That's thrilling. No. If people were told this, what do you think they'd be thinking? They'd be thinking, "Oh my gosh. There's no way I can be a part of that. I can't follow this guy John. I'll be killed. I don't want to die." Right? That's going to be the thought running through people's minds. They're going to be like, "John, are you insane? Why on earth would I follow you? Why?" So the thing here is this, is that if you have the truth, you're not going to be popular. No one is going to like you. In fact, people will hate you. Yeah. So much so that they'll want to kill you. So, whenever you hear about somebody like Wes Huff or whoever, doesn't really matter who it is, that's not a good sign that so many people like them. That's not a good sign. It's like, as an example, if you ever watch these mega churches, they have these people who go on stage, they call themselves preachers or whatever. When you have a mega church, that's a problem. That's a problem. And one of the ways we know this is if we go to Matthew chapter 7. Let me open up to that. So in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21 through 23, this is Jesus speaking. And he says, "Not everyone who calls out to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven." So at this moment in time, Jesus is making it clear that a lot of people will know about God, right? And they'll say, and so he goes on, he says, "Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter." So Jesus is making it clear, basically everyone's going to know about God, but there's only going to be a sliver of people who are going to actually be doing the will of God. So think about it like the whole world is saying, "Oh yes, we're Christians," right? But Jesus is kind of saying, well, they're not really Christians. There's only a small handful of people that are Christians. So he goes on, he says, "On judgment day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, we prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and performed many miracles in your name.' But I will reply, 'I never knew you. Get away from me, you who break God's laws.'" So, this is very important because Jesus is making it clear that people call out to him and say, "Lord, Lord, please let me in. Look at all the things that I've done." And he'll say, "Get away from me, all you sinners." Excuse me. Excuse me. Notice that Jesus is making it clear that it's people who break his laws, right? God's laws. So, what does that tell us? The majority of people are sinners, and the majority of people won't go to heaven. Why? Because they're breaking God's laws. So it tells us that in order to be saved, we can't break God's laws, right? So think about this. Say you're Andrew Madrid. Say you are me. And you understand this. And you understand, okay, only a few people are going to get to heaven. And the reason is because they're not breaking God's laws. Well, think about how popular that's going to go. How popular will you be if you tell people that the only way to heaven is to stop sinning? They'll kill you. And I'm not joking. They will hate you. Why? The simple fact is this. If you're a sinner and I tell you the only way that you can go to heaven is to stop sinning, you're going to be upset. And you're going to be upset because deep down inside, you're going to understand, I can't stop sinning. I'm addicted to sin. And so you're not going to like what I have to say. So am I going to be your friend? No. You're going to treat me like an enemy. And see, that's what happened with Jesus. That's what happened with John the Baptist. That's what happened to God's holy prophets, is that they spoke the truth. But people didn't want to hear the truth. Because, you know, if you are a sinner and I'm telling you you have to stop sinning in order to go to heaven, a couple things are going to happen. One, you're not going to want to stop sinning. And two, you're going to say, I don't know how to stop sinning. So, whenever you see these people out there, you know, who have huge followings, huge crowds, you know, think about the Catholic religion of 1.3 or 1.4 billion members. Obviously, there's a problem. There's a huge problem if you have that big of a following. You know, Jesus Christ didn't have a following of 1.4 billion disciples. You know, think about the guy Joe Osteen in his megachurch. He just told people what they wanted to hear. You know, think about these mega pastors, whatever they're called, who are like, you know, give me all your money and God's going to bless you with money. So the pastor is going to become filthy rich. He winds up owning mansions and airplanes, private jets, you name it. And meanwhile, the listener in the audience is throwing all their money at the guy. You see what I'm saying? So the person in the crowd is like, oh yeah, if I give this guy all my money, then God's going to bless me with more money. Right? But the guy never gets blessed with money. So it's one of those things that if you are telling somebody the truth, they're going to hate you. You're not going to be their fan. They're not going to be your fan. You know, you're going to be the enemy. And so we need to understand this. I want everyone to understand this, is that if you're going to follow Christ, the world is going to hate you. Absolutely hate you. So imagine this, and I'm going to toss this out there for all you men out there, and for women too. Okay, this goes both ways. But say you are a man and you want to follow God. That means the world's going to hate you. So imagine this. How many women out there are going to want to be your wife? It's going to probably take a miracle. Like, I'm not joking. It would probably take a miracle to find the one woman on the planet who's going to want to be your wife. Why? Because every other woman on the planet is going to be like, no. They'll cross you off their list. And I say that because, if you are a godly man, think about someone like, Jesus, John the Baptist, the prophets. Were they out wearing fancy jewelry? Were they at the gym busting weights, trying to look hot and amazing for all the women? No. They didn't care about the world. People like Jesus, John the Baptist, the prophets, so on and so forth, they didn't even have homes, right? They were like eating bugs and, having it rough. So what kind of woman in her right mind is going to be like, that's the man I want? That poor dude over there who's having a tough time. Right? No. All the women on the earth will be like, that guy there, he's a loser, right? He's poor, he's not, he doesn't go to the gym and work out. He doesn't have all these muscles, and he's not, what do they call him, ripped? Is that what it is? I don't know. See, that's how much I'm a part of the world is. I don't even know the lingo. I just kind of make it up as I go. But anyways, so somebody who's a godly man, he's going to be wanting to listen to the Word of God. He's going to want to teach it. He's going to want to, you see what I'm saying? But the worldly man, he's going to be trying to be a successful man. He's going to want to have a great career, make tons of money, so on and so forth. So for a man, a godly man, finding a godly woman to marry is going to literally be like winning the lottery. Like, it's going to be one woman on the face of the earth that's going to want to be your wife. The same thing applies to a godly woman. A godly woman is not going to be seeking after the world. So she is not going to be trying to put all this makeup on and, look beautiful and, wear all the earrings and jewelry and, no. A godly woman is going to look very plain. She's going to probably be, kept. She'll probably take showers and be clean. But she's not going to try and decorate herself and, try and get the attention of all the men. No. Like, to give you an example, in today's society, there's all this social media type stuff. A godly woman is not going to, be online posting pictures of how beautiful she is. She's not going to be seeking worldly attention. She's going to be seeking God's attention. And so, if you happen to be online and you're looking at all of these girls, they're all doing the same thing. They're all trying to look as beautiful as they can be. And so many of them, they try to use the filters, I guess that's what they call them, to enhance their beauty, things like that. It's fake. It's not real. And women like that, they just want worldly attention. So, for a woman who's plain, she's not seeking the attention of the world, how many men on earth are going to pick her? Not a lot. Not a lot. Do you see what I'm saying? So, the godly woman is not going to be hanging around the clubs, doing some wild dancing. She's probably going to be home, closer to home, probably reading scriptures, maybe at a soup kitchen, somewhere feeding the poor, something like that. So she's going to be, off in the closet somewhere. You know what I'm saying? She's going to be off where, very few people will see her. So both godly men and godly women are going to have a hard time, finding a spouse. And so, to what I was saying is that, if you follow God, most people aren't going to want you. And that's just the truth. So, so an example of this to really help you understand, imagine you're a man and you're a godly man and you marry someone who is maybe not a godly woman. What's going to happen with these two people, this couple? The man is going to be trying to follow God and say, hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And the woman is going to be like, no, I don't want to be at home. I want to go out to the clubs. I want to party. I want to, I want the male attention. I want jewelry and, I want a fancy home. And do you see what I'm saying? So they're not going to be equally yoked, And so what's going to happen is when the man says, honey, we need to stay at home, we need to, whatever, she's going to be like, you're trying to control me, right? I hate you. You're being mean. You're a meanie, right? It just doesn't work. So you have to have both people on the same page. So, a godly woman, she's not going to be looking for a mansion. She's probably going to be looking for, some kind of a home, but it's not going to be a mansion. It might be a very, what was the word, nestled? Is it nestled? Comfy? No. I don't know the word. I know there's a word out there to describe it. I can't think of it. But it's like a nestled. I hope I'm using that word right. It's a little nest. Nothing fancy, nothing special. And so I'm going to wrap this video up, but I want everyone to understand that if you are following God, the world's going to hate you because they're going to think that you're judging them. So like I said, imagine you tell people, all right, everyone, stop sinning. Right? How many people do you, be honest with yourself, how many people do you think are going to be like, you're right, I'm such a bad person, I need to stop? No. Probably what would happen is they would say, I'm not a sinner, I'm not bad, Adolf Hitler was bad, but I'm not a murderer. I don't steal. See, I'm a good person. Or they might try and turn things around on you. They might be like, well, you're telling me to stop sinning. What about you? You should take your own advice, right? And we have a good example of that in John chapter 6, the Bread of Life discourse. Jesus is talking to a crowd of people. If my Bible will allow me to flip over there. So Jesus is talking to a crowd of people. And what is he telling them? He's telling them that he has come down from heaven, right? He tells them, I am the bread that came down from heaven. So this is John chapter 6, verse 41. It says here, then the people began to murmur in disagreement because he had said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. They said, isn't this Jesus, the son of Joseph? We know his father and mother. How can he say, I came down from heaven? So what Jesus is saying in simple English, he's saying, folks, I'm God. I am God. I came down from heaven for you. And the people's response is basically, you're a liar. We know your mommy and your daddy. That was Mama Mary and Papa, what's his name? Joseph. Okay? So they say, that's not true. You didn't come from heaven. You're not God. We know who your parents are. Right? That's what I'm talking about. If you speak the truth, people are like, nope, you're a liar. Do you see what I'm saying? You're a liar. So that's the same way with me. I'm not here to gain any followers, any likes, any, praise and glory and fame. None of it. I know that everyone's going to hate what I have to say. Yeah. People will hate me. Yeah. So think about this. If you are a woman, are you going to want to marry a man who the world hates? Yeah, most women won't. No. Women are not going to be like, yes, you see that guy right there, the one everyone hates? That's the guy I want. And so here would be a good example with women. I think there was a movie some years ago. I think it was called A Walk to Remember. It's with Mandy Moore and Sean West, I think. I don't know if that's his name. I'm guessing. Sean something, maybe. I don't know. Anyways, this girl, she attends her church. She sings, she's, her character is supposed to be a pretty character. But it's what's the word? She's plain. She doesn't put makeup on. She doesn't, go to fancy stores to get the latest fashion, And so this girl, everyone's teasing her about her little sweater, right? And, they tease her because she's not hip. She's not cool, She's just, So that's the thing. If when you are a godly woman, the men of the world, they're not going to be after you. I've known so many women out there who say, all the men want me. And that's when you know there's a problem. You know, if all the men want you, then that means you're doing something wrong, right? When you're a godly woman, 99.9999999 to an infinity, men are not going to want you. That's just the way it is. The same way for the man. I mean, if you're a godly man, nobody's going to want you. They're going to kick you to the curb. So, when you're doing what's right, the world hates you. When you are doing what is wrong, the world's going to love you. So I want everyone to stop and realize that. I want you all to think about what that means. Do people like you? Because if people like you, there's a problem. And so, so it's like for me, you know, as a man, you know, I have to ask myself, what do I want in life? Do I want God's approval or do I want man's approval? Because if I get God's approval, then I'm not going to get man's approval. But if I'm seeking after the world's approval, I won't have God's approval. So it's one of those things that, you know, as godly men and women, you have to ask yourself, whose attention do I want? God's or the world's? So these are the things that make it difficult to go to heaven. Is, you know, what are you living for? And so in order to go to heaven, you're going to have to do very difficult things. So like I said, think about me, Andrew Madrid. If I'm telling you things that are godly, no one's going to like me. No one's going to like me. Everyone's going to feel judged. Everyone's going to feel like I'm attacking them. Everyone's going to feel however they feel. So do you think, you know, anyone is going to stand by me? That's a big fat no. So you have to ask yourself that. You know, definitely as godly men and women, am I willing to spend my life where the world hates me? Am I willing to be the lone wolf? You know, and I say that, you know, it's like for women. Women have a desire in them to be mothers, you know, to be wives. You know, you always hear about girls who talk about, when I was 7 years old, I pretended I was getting married. You know, I'd put on a white dress or a little white, you know, veil or whatever, and, you know, I would have my little girlfriend pretend she's the man, and we'd pretend we're getting married. I played house. You know, when I grew up, my mama, she bought me a toy house and little Barbies and Kens, right? That's what's on their mind, is getting married, have kids, right? But for the godly woman who's playing, she's not all trying to look fancy and pretty and, you know, who's going to want her? What man is going to want her? You know, a godly woman is not going to be, gossiping. She's going to be submissive. Here's a good example. She's going to be submissive. So the thing here is this. She's at odds with the world because the world is saying being submissive is bad. It's wrong. You shouldn't have to submit to a man. You're equal to a man. You're better than men. You can do anything you want. You don't have to submit to men. That's patriarchal. That's bad, right? That's controlling. You submitting to a man, that's controlling. You see, so as an example, the girls who've been brought up in today's society, they're going to be like, I'm not submitting to a man. I should get what I want. I deserve what I want. I want makeup, and I want to go to fancy restaurants, and I want a mansion and whatever else, right? And so, like I said, notice what happens. So, when you follow God, you're going to be enemy of the state. You're going to be enemy of everyone on the planet. So you have to make that choice. Am I going to follow God or am I going to follow man? You can't do them both. You can't. So when you see me teaching about God, you're seeing someone who knows that he's going to be hated. And Jesus talks about John the Baptist, and he's like, who did you go out and see? Was he swayed like a reed? No. He stuck with God even through the tough times. And that's what love is. That's showing true love is, you can see how much someone loves God. Am I willing to stick with God even through the tough times? Or when it gets tough, do I go back to the world? You see what I'm saying? And that would be a good example of marriages. A wife. Am I sticking with my godly husband? Am I being submissive to him? Or am I throwing my marriage away and getting a divorce because I want what I want? Am I serving myself or am I serving my husband? You can't have them both. You can't have a husband and then go do whatever you want to do. No. If you want to go do whatever you want to do, you can't have a husband. But then again, if you do what you want to do, then you're not going to have God either. So, the whole point of this video here is this. If you are the darling of the internet, if people are saying that you are, I don't know, you are the darling, whatever the word is, I can't think of it, then you know there's a problem. So, like I said, if you want to know if you're on the right track, stop and think how many people hate you. How many people hate you? And if at the end of the day you have, 100,000 followers, whatever the number is, you're doing something wrong. As Jesus teaches in the narrow door, not many people get to heaven. Very, very few people get to heaven. So if the world loves you, then you're doing something wrong. Absolutely. So, like I said, look at some of these Catholic apologists. They have hundreds of thousands of followers. That's not good. That's not a good sign. An example is this guy right here. On his back wall, I see this YouTube award. I don't know if those are other awards to the left or what. But obviously he has a nice little book collection. He has his fancy awards. You see what I'm saying? What is he about? He's about himself. He's saying, people, look at me. Look at how smart I am and all the books I know. Look at my awards. That's somebody who's seeking after the world. Look at this guy. Where's my YouTube awards? Oh, that's right. I don't have any. Where's my diplomas from all these schools? Oh, that's right. I don't have any. Am I trying to prop me up? No. If I were seeking after the world, boy, I'd be doing like everyone else. I'd have a library of books back here. I'd have my awards, my degrees, all of it. Yeah, and then people would like me. Oh, that Andrew Madrid. He's such a smart man, right? He knows what he's talking about. I'm not after fame, glory, attention. I'm not after the money. I'm not after any of it. And it's obvious. So if I'm not out catering to the world, what's the world going to think about me? It doesn't matter what I say, they're going to hate me. So think about this as an example. What kind of man is willing to take that hard road? What kind of man is willing to say, you know what? I'm going to follow God at all costs. Even if the world hates me. Even if the world thinks that I'm crazy. Oh well. At the end of the day, I have God. And then that's all that matters. So, a godly man is not going to be ruffled by the world. The world can call him names and lie about him and whatever they want. But he's still going to be a godly man. Right? So for all you men and women out there, I want you to really think long and hard. What path are you on? Are you on that narrow path with God where the world hates you? Or are you on that path where you're seeking attention? You're wanting attention from the world. Are you a woman who is plain? Or are you trying to get gussied up and look pretty for all the men out there? What kind of man are you looking for? Do you see what I'm saying? It's tough. It's tough, people. But try and understand that. You don't see me with fancy microphones or computing equipment. You don't see me, I'm not wearing a fancy suit. I'm wearing a ball cap. I'm not trying to impress anyone. The only one I care about is God. So just, like we were talking about, is that if you have a man who's only concerned about what God thinks, that's the man I would listen to. He's not trying to win you over. He's willing to accept life no matter what. Think about, these men of God who've died over the years for their faith. They loved God so much that they're willing to be stoned to death or crucified. That says a lot about a man. That says a whole lot about a man, that he's willing to go to hell and back for God. And see, like I said, for all you women out there, who are praying, God, send me a godly man to be my husband. Remember that. Because if you're praying for a godly man to be your husband, the world's going to hate him. They're not going to be his fans. Right? So, can you stick with a man that loves God? So we all have to make our choices in life. And this is where I'm going to wrap this up. We all make our choices in life, and we all have to decide, are we going to follow God or are we going to follow man? But I tell you this, if you follow God, everyone will hate you. Everyone will. But, if you're a girl and you find that men like you, yeah, you're probably doing something wrong. If you're one of these girls and you're saying, oh, look at all these men who like me. Ooh. So think about that. That's like you're feeding your ego. That's worldly. You can't be following God and be trying to, get glory yourself. Doesn't work. So, as a godly woman, if you're following God, they're going to be like, look at that girl. Look at those sweaters she wears. She's always has her nose in her Bible. She's always carrying her Bible around. She never does anything fun. You see, that's how people are. She just stays at home, or she just helps out at the soup kitchen, whatever it is. You see what I'm saying? So a godly woman is not going to be the prize, of the men of the world. And so when a godly man and woman are together, when they're married, They're one. They help each other out. They take care of each other. They don't abandon each other. The godly woman is not going to be like, okay, husband, I'm going to get a divorce. The godly man's not going to divorce the wife. They're going to be one. So, if you are a godly man and a godly wife, you have each other. Even if the world hated you, you have each other. You have God. So I'm going to wrap this up. I hope you all have a good day, and may God bless.